does not tell you this. My diseases are free. You can take them home. I have over 500 different diseases.
Yeah. What were we just talking about? We're talking about washing hands.
Darktide's central premise is about fighting against chaos cultists of the diseased variety. As you may know, this indicates they worship one of the 4 chaos gods, Nurgle, the patron saint of all that is diseased and stagnated. Do you know how the warp works? I sure hope you do since you clicked on this, but, well, a quick explanation to get us started would be beneficial. The warp is a parallel dimension to real space, shaped by the emotions of all living things. This warp juice is also something that comprises the souls of most living things. Since Warhammer 40k is rather a turbulent place, you can imagine how bad things are in the warp that reflects all emotion. Thusly, the 4 chaos gods are a product of tens of thousands of years of perpetual pain. 4 gods rule over the warp. Khorne, the god of violence, murder and speed metal. Slaanesh, the god of excess and perfection. Tzeentch, the bird boy responsible for change and trickery and scheming, all sorts of shenanigans. And finally, our lovely grandfather Nurgle, who loves to gift people with 3 things, namely disease. Warp energy leaks into real space through tears in reality. If you are exposed to it, it will begin affecting your soul, quite literally. In greater amounts, it will affect your body too. But at that point, it's not likely you're going to be sane enough to care anymore. Many lore tubers have compared it to radiation in how it works. However, I don't think it's that simple. But we'll settle on this metaphor for now. You see, the diseases Nurgle and his followers spread around isn't just your normal run-of-the-mill seasonal flu. It isn't blocked by hand washing, nor it is completely blocked by filters either. It is something that literally corrupts the victim's soul on contact. Usually the victim begins to notice this quite quickly. The chaotic energies woven into bacteria and viruses essentially enable these diseases to break boundaries a normal disease wouldn't be able to do. For example, one of these effects might be reanimation after the point of death, or dissolving the bones of the infected within seconds. Thusly, there's the question of why our main character in Darktide doesn't seemingly get sick. Of course, this is for gameplay purposes, but within the lore setting it remains one of the key questions I found most interesting. Our main topic will officially be the evaluation. How well every Darktide class would be in resisting the warp corruption in the Darktide setting, and we'll be comprising this as a tier list. You thought this would be a normal lore video. No boy, this was a tier list all along. Consider yourself tricked. I'll be considering the overall background lore to formulate a rating, although your opinion might differ, in case which I hope you comment it down below. Let's address the psychically projected elephant inside the room first.
What the fuck is this?
The Psyker in Darktide can be played in a safe and balanced manner, or constantly exploding and being down most of the match. The contrast between these is important within the lore, for there is a parallel to be made. An untrained Psyker is dangerous, like hilariously so. They could spontaneously burst into flames, make you burst into flames, make everything around a mile radius burst into flames, and depending on their power level, you guessed it, make the entire planet burst into flames. Or something relatively minor, like turn into a demon host. While people generally distrust and shun Psykers for this reason, a sanctioned Psyker is one of the safest kinds of people to probably hang around when dealing with chaotic corruption. A trained Psyker is adept with the art of setting up mental barriers. They can consciously defend against chaotic corruption, and some are even able to cast protective auras on others. Since psychic warding is the only guaranteed way of resisting chaotic energies, this is pretty great. However, if said Psyker gets overwhelmed by something possessing greater psychic energy, or simply loses their focus, you could be in for some bad times. Thusly, the key factor is if the Psyker is considerate in the way they tap into the warp, or are one of your average overload enthusiasts. Overall, if we consider the optimal Psyker, they get a pretty good rating for chaotic resistance. S.T.A.L.K.E.R. The Veteran. Guardsmen veterans are usually reliable and relatively loyal to the Imperial creed. However, if you've spent any time around the Grey Knight section of Warhammer players, you know what I'm about to bring up next. Almost any force fighting in contact with chaos will inevitably be corrupted. The only differentiating factor is the speed at which this happens. And even if it doesn't, there's always risks involved. It is usually more efficient to list off regiments which have accrued enough veterancy as unfortunate combat casualties due to misplacements of firing grids for artillery. This is to be done when signs of corruption have been deemed too obvious to no longer ignore. On the surface, a trooper might seem loyal, and they might even think themselves as being loyal. But once they start thinking, the honoring of the Emperor necessitates the construction of gladiatorial arenas inside the barracks and ditching range fire in favor of melee combat with sharp instruments and folding chairs. It might already be too late. Thusly, the smart heads at the Officia Munitorum enforce that the Imperial Guard is set up into separate regiments, like tank and artillery regiments. This is not because it is tactically and logistically efficient. It is because, as the Horus Heresy proved, any military force could turn traitor at any given moment. Separating military elements into regiments guarantees that if one piece turns traitor, the rest are able to beat it consistently. It is essentially a game of preemptive rock, paper, scissors on a tactical level. However, this fact is evident to any competent aspiring Chaos champion. Thusly, Chaos cultists are not usually insane enough to outright fight to the death unless they deem they are able to win the engagement, but utilize guile and deceit to slowly corrupt others around themselves. As in the case of Tertium, this tactic succeeded, and as you can see, the consequences are not optimal. What you face is an army of corrupted veterans. As a veteran, thusly, what you face is what used to be you. I'd rate the veteran as the most likely class out of the four to be corrupted. Cetia. The Zealot. This is perhaps the most straightforward explanation in the tier list. Your average Imperial Zealot doesn't just hate chaos. They do that professionally.
We're here to kill chaos.
It's probably the reason they've left their homeworld in the first place. The most zealous Imperial citizens typically are found on worlds with a strong ecclesiastical presence. They usually might volunteer on joining crusading forces and passing on to inquisitorial regiments. Some ecclesiastical worlds even have their own militarum regiments. These don't merely knock on your door and ask if you've heard the Emperor's word. They might break down your door, your entire house, and probably the entire district to make sure you've really heard it this time. These individuals are so pious their mental fortitude against chaotic corruption is really high. They possess potential to conjure up power through faith alone. As an example, some are even able to conjure up minor miracles, like guiding bullets to their targets through prayer, burn demons out of existence with the help of choir singing, and even are able to summon up saints like Pokemon. While they technically are more vulnerable to chaotic taint than a trained Psyker, they also are not as tasty as Psykers are to demons, so they have the virtue of being less likely to be corrupted by anything seeking you actively out in comparison to a Psyker. If a Psyker is something tasty, like a donut, a Zealot is probably something bitter, like licorice, salmiakki. However, even if faith is a powerful defense against chaotic corruption, it is not as straightforward. It doesn't protect you fully. It can falter, and chaos is really good at getting you when you are at your weakest. Thus it wouldn't be out of the question to say that despite some questionable attachment to skulls,
blood for the Emperor! Skulls for the Golden Throne!
the Darktide Zealot is more capable of withstanding chaos without being immediately corrupted. 8. The Ogryn. Ogryns are naturally resistant against the taint of chaos. This is because their greatest weakness is also their greatest strength, namely the lack of intellect. You see, these precious boys are big and strong, but they're not that smart. The average Ogryn is on par with your run-of-the-mill 8-year-old in terms of intelligence. However, this is actually really good. The Ogryn doesn't think nor question orders, and many a commissar likes commanding Ogryns just for this reason alone, despite the occasional mishap, mostly involving the usage of handheld explosives. Your average Ogryn isn't going to turn and run unless he's told to do so. The Darktide Ogryn player has is a bonehead. How do I know this? Firstly, because of the voice lines in the game. Secondly, because the Ogryn is smart enough to actually reload his gun. They get a computer chip hammered into their skull, which improves their cognitive capabilities to some limited degree. They can follow a little more complex orders and can act more independently. And that's about it. Thusly, most Ogryn boneheads typically act as bodyguards, like the legendary Nork Dedag. What does this have to do with chaos, you may ask? Typically, the Chaos Ogryns you see have been virtually bombarded by so much chaotic energies they can hardly be considered anything but insane beasts with no traces of humanity, or have been purposely raised from birth to worship chaos. However, your average Imperial Ogryn isn't likely going to be affected by chaotic ideals nor temptations. This is because of the aforementioned simplistic mindset. Especially in the case of Nurgle, the function of diseases is not usually to kill, but to hasten the corruption of the mind. That, however, gets rather complicated when your target seemingly doesn't understand any of the ideals or fundamentals you're trying to preach them, nor apparently do they believe they could get sick at all. Heck, they probably can't even read. Imagine a philosopher trying to argue virtue ethics with a preschooler. Now imagine a word bearer trying to argue religion with an Ogryn. At least a preschooler won't kill you if he gets bored. Club heretic, get rations. Life is good. I mean, if you club a bad man overhead with blunt instrument and get rations, why worry about anything? The Ogryn, by its nature, is pure, despite being a human. He doesn't need to show off nor do anything besides doing what he's told by those who serve the big golden man up above, and that makes him happy. The Ogryn gets a separate tier, the good lads tier.
So, could I get a subscribe, sir?